In this video, we're going to be exploring Autogen Studio. Now, before we talk about Autogen Studio specifically, let's talk about the Autogen framework itself. Now, essentially, the Autogen framework is a framework that was designed by the research team at Microsoft, designed to build generative AI applications simply by having agents talk to themselves as well as a human to solve problems. Now, the Autogen framework is very similar to other frameworks that you've seen before, like the Langchain agent framework as well, which uses a similar style to solve problems as well. The idea is simply to have agents speak to one another as well as retrieve human feedback while solving the problems that they want to have. So let's look at the key concepts associated with Autogen before we go and jump into the studio itself. First, we have agents. Now, agents are large language model powered assistants. They perform specialized tasks. Now, in Autogen, there are two main agents that come built in. One is the assistant agent. The assistant agent is responsible for using large language models like GPT-4 to perform actions like coding, generating text from the LLM, stuff like that, right? Now, the user proxy agent, on the other hand, is responsible for representing the human itself. So it gets information from the human, it relays it to other agents. It also is able to execute code on behalf of the human as well. So these are the two primary agents that you'd have in an Autogen framework that are working together to solve problems. The next concept, which is very, very key, is a concept of tools. Now, tools are actions that can be taken by these agents. So a tool can be a search tool, like I mentioned before, a document retriever. It could be a tool that checks a calendar by calling the Google API calendar to retrieve information from there. It could be a tool that replies an email or sends a message to Slack, or any other action that you can write in form of a Python function. And it's the same concept in Langchain. I will drop some links in the video for you to see some videos I've made in the past where I've built agents that have different tools that do different things. Now, the Autogen team originally released this as a Python library, which you can go ahead and build these stuff out in Python. But recently, they have added a UI to it to make it much easier to build this application. And that is what we're going to be exploring today. We're going to be looking at Autogen Studio and showing you how to set it up and how to get it working so that you can use that to build your applications very, very quickly. Because I think comparing the two, using the studio really makes it much, much easier to work with. So to work on this, we're just going to go into our VS Code. And the very first thing we want to do here in VS Code is to set up a virtual environment. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So Python 3, and I'm going to set up my virtual environment. I'm using venv here, venv, and I'm going to do Autogen YT demo. And next up, I'm going to go ahead and activate my environment. I'm going to do Autogen source, Autogen YT demo, and I'm going to do a /bin/activate. And now I have my virtual environment activated. Now, next up, you would need to export your OpenAI API key. So get your OpenAI API key, because we're going to be using OpenAI for this example. I believe you can also use other LLMs like locally hosted LLMs as well. But for the interest of this video, I'm going to be using OpenAI here. So I'm just going to do OpenAI API key. And I'm just going to go ahead and get my OpenAI key added here. All right, I'm just going to paste in my key here, but I'm just going to pause the video to make sure that it doesn't get seen. All right, so I have my OpenAI key exported into my environment, so it's ready for use. The next thing we're going to do is to install Autogen Studio. Autogen Studio. And this is going to get Autogen Studio installed. And that's pretty much all you really need to do. All right, so now let's go ahead and run our Autogen Studio. And all we need to do is to do Autogen Studio, and we do UI, and we do a port 8081, and this should get our Autogen Studio activated. So as you can see, our Autogen Studio is started, and all we need to do is just go to this URL right here, and that should get us access to Autogen Studio itself. So as you can see here, you have your Autogen Studio beta, and there are three sections. There's a build, playground, and gallery, and we're going to go run through each of these different components. So let's start with the build, because this is where you actually get to build your actual application out. Now, there are three main areas of this, and we already discussed this, but there's a skills, there's the agents, and workflows. Now, skills are basically the tools we talked about before. As you can see, out of the box, they have three main skills here. There's a generate images skills, there is a fetch profile skill. Generate images basically, by the way, just generates images from DALL-E 3. And fetch profile basically scrapes websites to return information, and the find papers is for finding research papers. And then you have agents, which is just basically your primary agent as your primary assistant, as well as your user proxy agent, and you can add more agents as you like. Next up, we have workflows. Now, workflows are the tools that basically run specific tasks or a group of tasks. So in this case, you have a general agent workflow, you have a travel agent group chat workflow, which is just for sort of helping with, planning your trip and things of that nature. And we have a visualization agent workflow as well. This, I believe, is for generating charts and things of that nature. So let's try out one of these workflows right here. So we have here in our playground, which is where you can try things out. You can just basically start a new session, and a new session is just basically a chat session. You have to select which of the workflows you want to try that out with. So in our case, let's select visualization agent workflow, and all you need to do is just simply hit the create button, and a session is created. Now, there are a few examples here that they have provided, which are example prompts, and let's try one of them to see how it works. So let's try the stock price one, and basically the example says plot a chart of NVIDIA and Tesla stock price for 2023, save the result in a file named NVIDIA Tesla PNG. So now this is actually initiating a conversation between agents. Now you can't see that conversation happening here, but you can go back into the actual into your terminal and see exactly what's going on. Let's pull it up here so you can see an example of what's going on. So conversation started with the user proxy itself sending a message to the visualization assistant saying, this is what the person who initiated this action wants to do. That is our message right there. We want to plot a chart. Now the visualization assistant says to the proxy, well, to plot a chart, these are things that you need to do. You need to collect the stock price from NVIDIA and Tesla. You need to create a line chart. You need to ensure the visualization follows best practices. And then it tells you that you need to save the chart. So this is basically what that personal assistant is doing. Its responsibility typically is around planning out, writing the code, and then designating this back to the user proxy. Now the user proxy is saying, okay, all right, I have to get started with doing something here. I'm going to go really perform the actions that the visualization assistant has told me. So it says first and foremost, like, okay, I'm trying to do this, but I'm seeing an error. So it tries to execute what has been told to it by the personal assistant or the visualization assistant, and it's hitting like a roadblock here. It cannot find the Y Finance module, and it's going back to the proxy to say, here is something, I'm hitting this error. And the visualization assistant says, okay, well, you need to go ahead and install the Y Finance module because it's not installed in the system. So you need to really go ahead and install it, and it tells it exactly what it needs to do. So right here, you can see it's giving it more actions of what it could do. And it actually went ahead and actually did that. So you can see it's actually executing that and installing Y Finance. So it's installed a module that is going to allow it to be able to do, get that information it needs. And now the visualization assistant says, okay, now you have that assistant installed. Here is what you need to do again. So it gives it another Python code that it needs to run, tells it exactly what it needs to do. And once again, it tells it, gives it some information as well, telling it exactly what to do. Now it goes back and says, okay, I have done the work. It executes the action. It says the action was successful, and it says that stock data has been fetched and saved to the CSV files. And as you can see here with the visualization assistant, it says now that we have the stock data, now we can proceed to create the line chart. So first step was basically retrieving the information from Y Finance. Now it's going to the next step, which is basically plotting this in a graph. So again, this visualization assistant is responsible once again for telling it exactly what it needs to do. So it's giving it another Python code which shows how to plot a graph, and it gives it all of that. Again, user proxy goes ahead and executes that, but goes ahead and finds an error. So you see that it has an error here. It says, well, I didn't find the matplotlib, and actually goes off its end here, and it says that it couldn't find that action. So what has happened, and I think reason this has happened, the reason why it couldn't really go ahead and complete this action was simply because there is a limitation in the number of times the agents can talk to one another. I think they hit that limit, which is why they actually stopped. Now, but you can see like all the other results of the stuff they've done, and now I can go ahead and tell it to complete the action. So if I go back and do it this time, now because it has already installed Y Finance and it has done all the work that it needed to do beforehand, it's going to be much easier now because it would have all the information it needs to actually continue. So, okay, there we go. It actually went ahead and installed it, but let's see what was going on here. So it says that it appears that there was an error in the dates from matplotlib, because which is necessary for converting dates. Let's correct the code by importing the required module, and here's the necessary module required. Now, by the way, it's already run this. This is Python, so it's running this. It's already sort of done the actions that we want, but still, it needs to save this information as an image and make that available to us. So let's see if it's actually doing or performing the action that we want it to perform. So let's see, it's still basically going and doing some work that it has been told to do. So the user proxy right now is basically attempting to save that image for us to use. So let's see if it's able to do that. All right, so it says the execution was successful, and as you can see here, we do have the agent returning the information, and here we do see that it returns the image that we were looking for. Now, it was a little rocky. It got there in the end, but I'll show you part of the reason why it was having the challenge that it was having, stopping without actually executing the action. Now, let's go ahead and create our own workflow and try it out. So I'll go back to the build, and this time around, we're just going to add a very, very simple skill. What we're trying to build here is simply a workflow that summarizes a research paper and converts it into an audio file. That's essentially what we're building here, right? So we need a skill that allows our agent to actually summarize the paper. We have that here because they have to find the paper. So that is something that they can do. But we need to give it the ability to convert its summary to audio. So we're going to be using OpenAI's text-to-speech model for this. And I already created a function. I'm going to show you this function here. I'm going to drop this in the GitHub repository for this particular application so you can get to use it. So here, I'm going to just put a new skill here. I'm going to call this skill text, or let's just call it generate audio. And I'm going to basically put my function right here, and my function just simply takes in an input text and takes in the model, which is TTS-1, provides the voice as alloy, and I also have some doc string here, explaining what my function does, which is very critical when you're providing a tool to a large language model. It uses this as context in understanding how to actually use the function as well. It basically makes the performance much better. So basically, this is just taking some text and converting it into audio, nothing too crazy here, and we're showing just an example usage of it. So generate audio is a skill that we're creating, and all we're doing is to say, okay, so this is a skill that we've created. Now, the next thing we want to do is to go into workflows. Now, in our workflow, we're going to create a new workflow. Now, you can create two types of workflows. There's a 2-agent workflow and there's a group chat. For us, we're going to be using the 2-agent workflow here. And in our workflow, we're just going to be calling this workflow audio summarization workflow. So let's call it that. And we're just going to say summarizes, okay, provides audio for summarized text. Let's call it that. And here, we're just going to give our assistant a few skills because we want our assistant to be able to perform these different actions. Now here, we're just going to go in here. Now you can always modify, the system message and give it, more information about, the behavior it needs to run. It already has like a default that we can just use for now. Let's call our assistant audio generation assistant, right? Let's just call it that. Okay, generates summaries of let's say it generates audio summaries, audio summaries of research papers, right? That's what we're going to be looking at here. Now, this is what was causing the problem earlier on. When you have your maximum auto reply set to a very low number, the iteration will stop at a certain point as it hits these different roadblocks. So if it hits 8 times, then it's just going to simply terminate. So you can either improve or increase it. You can increase it all the way to 30, or you can reduce it depending on what you want. Now, keep in mind that every time this your agent replies, you are actually using your LLM. So in terms of cost, this maximum auto reply can actually incur some cost. So be careful to set it where it makes sense. I am fairly confident that my workflow can run under 10, back and forth. So I'm just going to leave it at 10. Human input is always going to be set to never. You have your system message. And like I said, you have a model you can choose here. We're using GPT-4 1106 preview. One thing to keep in mind, you can use multiple models. Now, in terms of skills, we're going to add 2 skills to our assistant. We want it to be able to research papers. So that's the first one we wanted to do. So we want it to be able to find papers. So all you need to do is to go ahead and add the skill here. So you see the function. So each skill is just basically a function. I'm just going to go ahead and add that skill. All right, so the next thing we want to do is to add the other skill which it needs, which is a generate audio skill. This skill basically would allow it to generate audio from whatever summarization it's made. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this skill. Okay, cool. So we now have a few skills here, 2 skills added. You can add multiple skills. It always would choose the right tool to use. And all I have to do here is to go ahead and hit OK. And you see we have a user proxy, which is going to be the sender and the one executing the code. And we have the audio generation assistant, which is going to generate the audio summaries. It's going to look up the papers, the research papers, and then generate audio summaries of them. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And our application is ready to go. Now, to use our application, all we need to do is to go ahead to the playground, and we can start a new session for our playground. Here, we can select the workflow that we just created, which is audio summarization workflow. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit the create button. So here, we're just going to ask it for a question. Now, I'm just curious to know about the Autogen paper itself, because it does have an original paper. I'll put a link in the description if you're curious to find documentation around Autogen specifically. So let's say, give me an audio summary of the Autogen paper. All right, so now is going to start. So let's go ahead and see exactly what's going on here. So user proxy here said, give me an audio summary of Autogen paper. So let's see what our audio generation assistant is going to be saying. So it says, so let's see what it's saying here. So to provide you with an audio summary of the Autogen, I will need to first search the paper on Arxiv and get the summary text. And then I'll use the text to speech function to generate audio file of that summary. So again, it tells it exactly how it's going to do this. So it's looking at the skills it has and looking at this paper searching skill because that's what it needs to do. So once it does that, it says, okay, user proxy says, okay, cool, I need to run that action. It runs that particular tool and returns information from this paper. So this is information coming directly from the paper. So this is Autogen is an open source framework that allows developers to build LLM applications via multiple agents, blah, blah, blah. And then the audio generation assistant says, okay, great, we have the summary of the Autogen paper. Now we need to use the text-to-speech function to generate an audio file of this summary. I'll execute the following Python script to generate, to create the audio file. So here it tells it, here's the summary text and here's the function you need to run. So it says, you need to run this text-to-speech function, which is the function we provided to it. And it provides essentially how it's going to run it. And as you can see here, it says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and run this action. The user proxy runs the action, and it says the audio summary of the Autogen paper has been successfully created and has been saved as an MP3 file. And we can see the MP3 file link right here. So let's go ahead and open this link and play the results. Let's go ahead and do that. So I have the file right here. So typically it stores these inside Autogen Studio under the file section, under web and file section, and you see all the results of all the files being created by Autogen. So you can always go check for them here. So we see our audio. So let's play the audio and see how it works.
Autogen is an open source framework that allows developers to build LLM applications via multiple agents that can converse with each other to accomplish tasks. Autogen agents are customizable, conversable, and can operate in various modes that employ combinations of LLMs, human inputs, and tools. Using Autogen, developers can also flexibly define agent interaction behaviors. Both natural language and computer code can be used to program flexible conversation patterns for different applications. Autogen serves as a generic infrastructure to build diverse applications of various complexities and LLM capacities. Empirical studies demonstrate the effectiveness of the framework in many example applications, with domains ranging from mathematics, coding, question answering, operations research, online decision-making, entertainment, etc.
All right, so that was our audio that was generated, and this is pretty awesome to see this happening. So imagine you can do like quite a number of things, and if we go back to our actual session, you would see the same sort of output that we saw on the command line. We see that it returns the audio, the MP3 file that is generated. Of course, we can play it right in here. Maybe something that the Autogen guys are going to be adding as capabilities inside the Autogen Studio itself is interacting with more files. I think right now you can interact with things like, Python files shows you like, the code itself, if it was an image, things like that. But I think things like video or things like images are still showing, but things like audio, we don't have a player for them yet. And I'm sure that they're going to add some of these capabilities in the future. Now, once you are done with your session and you want to make that session available for reuse at a later time, you can just simply publish that session as I have here. And once you publish the session, it's now available in your gallery. So it's a collection of agent specifications and sessions. So this basically, gives you, publishes it. Maybe you want to share with your team. Now, the interesting thing about Autogen Studio is that you can host this and make it available to your team. It could be a team of business users who may not have coding skills, but they have the ability to put together sophisticated use cases. You can, work together with the developer to get these actions in there. But I think this is going to be a fun way to build this application. I'm really curious to see where they go with this project, because there's so many of these different frameworks out there swirling around the air, but Autogen seems to be a very, very promising one. In the future, I'm going to be making more videos about different Autogen concepts or use cases that you can actually do. We're going to look at other examples of how you can build these applications. But I love the fact that they're making some no-code, or let's call it actually a low-code tool that you can use to interact with it. Until next time, have a great one.